Behind me sits Harrisburg East Mall, now known simply as Harrisburg Mall, or at least what remains of it. The last handful of years have not been kind to this mall, with attendance dropping, anchor stores leaving, and like many businesses, the COVID-19 pandemic putting the final nail in the coffin for this mall. In fact, it was confirmed back in February of 2023 that the mall would be demolished and cleared for redevelopment in this area. Now, if you're from this general area, you'll feel sympathetic, or at least a little sad, like I am. I remember fond memories of coming here in my youth. I remember jumping up and down in the indoor playground that they have inside here. I remember eating delicious food on the second floor food court. And I remember even watching the most epic cinematic movie in history. It was once full of life and joy, and now sits depressed and in the process of demolition. Now join me as we walk down the hallways one last time of Harrisburg Mall. Welcome to Down the Corridor. A brief history of the central Pennsylvanian icon starts all the way back in 1969, when the building of the mall was complete, right above an enormous limestone cave full of different types of rock and water formations, something that the area is very well known for. The owners, M.A. Kravitz and Fidelity Mutual Life Insurance, had high hopes with the mall, hoping that it would be a part of the American mall boom. And on October 9th of 1969, the Harrisburg Mall was officially open to the public. In the 1970s and 80s, as most of the malls at the time, Harrisburg Mall exploded with popularity, attracting many people during that time to explore the thriving and bustling corridors. Every available storefront was lit up with bright, lively colors, a prime reflection of how the mall had hit its peak. Of course, with the mall a couple decades after its opening, anchors and tenants leave their spaces, much like JCPenney's and Gibbons behind me did, as they left their spaces permanently. With the turn of the new millennium, they needed something that would drastically boost the appeal and style of the outdated Harrisburg East Mall. The original owners of the mall decided someone else should take over. In 2004, they would get an enormous $60 million renovation bill that would see major changes to the interior corridor, including the addition of a 14-screen movie theater titled The Great Escape, right behind me. With the current structure of the mall taking its final forms, it seems like everything, at least for the time being, was good or at least content. And even in 2006, they added Macy's to the growing list of stores they have at the mall. But just 2 years later, calling the mall's growth good couldn't be further from the truth, unfortunately. Let me paint the picture. It's 2008, and housing and retail would go completely upside down. The events leading up to the stock market crash seemed like nothing at first to the average person, although expert brokers and financiers knew what was on the horizon. Unlike other instances of dips in shares and prices, this was going to be very different. Just 12 days before September 29th, the U.S. economy very nearly collapsed, with a notable investor at the time withdrawing figures of around $172 billion. Soon after, the U.S. government would come into the picture, with the Treasury pleading to Congress for a relief sum that would reverse the looming recession. September 26 comes around and Washington Mutual Incorporated files bankruptcy, with depositors withdrawing $16.7 billion, all in the last 10 days. The next few days on Wall Street, investors would find the literal definition of living hell. We didn't know it at first, but this would become the beginning of an enormous financial turmoil that would see more than $2 trillion gone in this span. And on September 29th of 2008, the stock market would collapse in front of everyone's eyes.
And because the owners of Harrisburg Mall had connections to Wall Street and the same businesses that folded, it only made more issues for themselves. For a mall that just spent $60 million on renovations just a handful of months before, the word disastrous then becomes a massive understatement. Add that with the American public not finding themselves shop at malls anymore, and then it becomes more than disastrous. In fact, from this period of financial uncertainty, Americans would go find themselves shopping at places more like Walmart, Target, and the newly popularized Amazon.com, which at this point was only a decade old. Even when the greater part of the recession was over, the world and retail would have to find themselves the funds to make up for the last 2 years. Before 2009, the mall owners at the time, TD Bank, had a partnership with Feldman, Lubert, Adler, Harrisburg, but noticed after a little bit of time into the ownership that FLAH defaulted their mortgages. Naturally, TD Bank took them to court and wanted possession of the mall. Nearly $50 million was due, unheard of figures in today's standards, of course. The future of the mall at this point was quite uncertain, and it would get even worse. Harrisburg Mall, which at the time still had 83 stores open, would enter a sheriff's sale, an auction for big spaces like a mall. With each passing day, the fate of this place lay with immense uncertainty. It could fall either way within a single day. That's how sheriff sales work. We would have to wait for a clear answer, though, until July 14th, 2012, where Harrisburg Mall would leave its sheriff sale, and with a brand new owner.
St. John's Properties, a company based in Baltimore, would purchase the whole land, including the mall, a Toys R Us behind the mall, and an Applebee's that sits in front of the property, all for $9.2 million, a staggering $8 million drop of what TD Bank paid for the mall when they bought it in 2003. This is huge news to the mall and community, as St. John's Properties had turned around struggling buildings in the greater Baltimore area and other locations for many years. And as of the making of this documentary, they currently have 108 properties across America, some being struggling buildings flipped to profitability. They had their deep pockets into this venture, and with the intent of flipping the slowly dying mall into something that would be a regular destination to visit. Unfortunately, like how most of the story goes, that doesn't happen. In 2013, a year after the purchase, St. John's Properties released a study going over how the value from 2013 dropped from $17.5 million to an exhausted $7.5 million, a nosedive of 46% in overall property value. Those numbers aren't good at all, but if you're a store owner inside the mall, this news was disastrous. By 2015, stores continued to leave, but most noticeable around this time was the aforementioned Toys R Us behind the mall that had shut its doors permanently. The growth of online shopping from this time would be the direct reason to the mall's future decline. The convenience of not leaving your house to buy items less expensive was starting to grow across America, and by 2018, online shopping was at an all-time high, and even leading to the closures and bankruptcies of companies like Toys R Us, who liquidated all stores and assets by March of that year. The writing was on the wall for American malls. Once responsible for the retail boom in the 1960s, was now endangered. Harrisburg Mall was one of them, but not the only one, because just 10 minutes down Interstate 83, you would reach yet another struggling mall. We are outside of Colonial Park Mall, which first opened all the way back in 1960 as an open-air mall, originally opening with Sears and a food fair as their main anchor stores. A roof would later be installed shortly afterwards and attract more stores. Soon, this mall would be the destination to be at in the early to mid-80s. Everything that you would want here, a one-stop shop here at Colonial Park Mall. But after 2 owners came and went, the following 30 years for the mall would be a colossal struggle. Around the same time, Toys R Us filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, selling their land at Harrisburg Mall just a few miles down Interstate 81. Another big-name anchor store, Bon-Ton, will close their Colonial Park location after filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy in an effort to save the massive loss of money at that time. In mid-2022, Sears, longtime and original anchor store, will close their doors after a long and lengthy bankruptcy of their own brand, causing them to liquidate all assets and stores shortly after, leaving Boscov's the last anchor store here at this mall. This would have an incredible impact for the mall's future, as in mid-2024, it hasn't recovered since. And a matter of fact, in the early stages of writing the script for this documentary, the mall would go through its own litany of issues. A Maryland-based company bought the property and the mall, saying in multiple articles and quotes, claiming that they would demolish the entire structure for mixed housing and commercial retail use. But after they came across some unpaid bills surmounting $250,000, the mall would enter a sheriff's sale, very reminiscent to the Harrisburg Mall. If the owners didn't pay their overdue bills by a specific deadline, the property would go to the township, and they would figure out what to do with it from there. And with 25 minutes to go before the deadline, no one was found. Until the last owners of the mall stepped in and paid off the bills themselves, averting the detrimental sheriff's sale. Now, you might be asking why I bring up this mall in a tale about a completely different mall 10 minutes down the highway. It's because instances like this is what make malls so vulnerable to major store closures and sheriff sales, and that anything can happen overnight. For the next 2 years, Harrisburg Mall would lose more stores, and as a result, more money. This eventually led to the closure of Macy's, leaving Bass Pro to be the last remaining anchor store here at the mall. The owners had put millions to try and revive this mall. For almost a decade they did. But once again, like in 2008, the longing efforts and attempts would be put on an immediate hold.
Apple shutting down stores worldwide. Theme parks closing their doors.
States, the risk is low.
New phase. The U.S. death toll from the virus has surpassed 100 people.
20,000. More than 46,000.
Today, Saturday, March 14th, 2020.
Like everything else in early 2020, the entire world shut down, not knowing at that moment when things would open back up, or if they would ever. The closure of many businesses during the pandemic is almost a perfect one-for-one replication of what happened during the 2008 housing crisis. In early 2021, the hours of the voting were shortened significantly. The shortened hours would remain relatively the same, even to this day, with very little change from the COVID-altered schedule. And by 2023, it had been over a decade since St. John had purchased the property in that crucial sheriff's sale auction. And since then, they had not seen much return on profit, meaning that every year that they tried to keep turning around the mall to make money, they would do the opposite. The owners had proposed to demolish the vacant movie theater, and they actually made good progress on it before mysteriously halting and never bringing it up again. Then, St. John would announce a bombshell to the press and the community.
Harrisburg Mall could be in for a major transformation. The mall's owners are proposing a plan to demolish much of it. St. John's property says their plan would not affect Bass Pro Shops, but beyond that, the future for other existing stores in the complex is unclear.
After hosting hundreds of thousands of shoppers for decades, the end appears to be near for the Harrisburg Mall in Dauphin County. Mall ownership wants to tear it down and replace it with other options.
The company had submitted a rezoning plan of the mall and a complete redevelopment of the property it sits on, proposing that the mall be demolished but leave Bass Pro Shops as the only remaining piece of the mall structure. This spread across almost every local news source around the greater central Pennsylvania area, and even on some notable mall Reddit forums, creating buzz around the mall and its next step towards this redevelopment plan. When the submission came to the township, it was thought that it would be a quick process to finalize things, but it would end up taking several months. Speculation started to go around about whether or not this project would actually go through, as it's common for malls to get rejected by their township commission. But then, on June 15th, it was cleared, and the mall's life would be officially numbered. Before the Thanksgiving holiday, a very notable leather store just adjacent from the food court would close their doors and relocate elsewhere, even opening 2 new stores in Lower Allen Township just down the road from Harrisburg Mall, and a location at the King of Prussia Mall near Philadelphia. Of course, that being the 3rd largest mall in the country. However, just 2 weeks before the Christmas holiday, 2 store owners went to local news stations claiming they received eviction notices from St. John's themselves. This would be shocking news, as this would mean that St. John's hadn't kept their word on the original schedule. And just 2 days later, the claims would become reality. An official announcement from the mall owners themselves on December 13th would come out, confirming the claims and giving every store in the mall until January 31st of 2024 to vacate their spaces. The Harrisburg East Mall, the mall that once stood so mighty for over half a century, accommodating so many tenants and anchor stores, and at one point was the Mid-State's most popular mall, had been made its grave early. St. John's released a statement on the developing story, laying out their new schedule on the demolition of the property, where demolition would begin in the spring and finish up a little over a year later, and construction on 12 new buildings would commence. Quoted by ABC 27 News saying, "It was extremely important that we satisfy Swatara Township residents, Dauphin County taxpayers, and the regional business community. After careful consideration, research, and planning, we believe we have arrived at a solution that leverages our company's strengths and experience, and which will provide long-term value and benefits to the community."
That leaves us here in the post-final days of the Harrisburg East Mall. As you can see behind me, during the writing of the script, it was still intact, but now as we're filming, it is not so. The Macy's that you see behind me, they started demolishing that about 2 days ago, which was unscheduled to our plans, but you work with what you got. Besides that, we stand out here in the rather unusually lukewarm March day here in central Pennsylvania. For most, this mall is nothing more than just another building getting torn down to make room for more commercial and retail spaces that they can go and spend their monies on and waste their tax dollars. But for the few like me, I'll actually miss this place. Unlike many, I actually found myself rather liking this place towards the end. It wasn't a matter of, I like this place when it's gone, or I wish it was demolished. I liked it because I experienced something that most people didn't. I experienced the death of a mall, and that's something that many people can't experience in their lifetimes. But excluding that, I rather liked this place coming here as a youth. I didn't really understand the concept of a mall when I came here when I was less than 5 or an age like that, but I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed this place while it was still around, and even when I'm 16 making this documentary, I enjoyed coming here. I enjoyed documenting the history of this local phenomenon that most towns and cities don't have. The Harrisburg Mall allowed me to talk and even meet some local heroes that I've looked up to for years, never thinking that I would have the chance to actually meet and talk to them. It was a place where you can enjoy your time with your friends and family, go shopping, go eat, go watch a movie, and forget about the outside world, even if it was just for even 2 hours. My grandmother helped set the displays at Macy's, leading up to the store's opening to the public. She would later move into accounting at Macy's, leaving around 7 years later. It might have been several decades ago, but her memories still last. And even while the building may not be here in a few short months, the memories and recollection of this place will live on through me and others that have been impacted by this beloved mall in some way. And as the sun sets and the mall shutters its doors for one final time, I thank it for all of its happiness that it has brought me. And for me, good night, Harrisburg Mall.